Please come. I need you. This is our immediate life or death situation. I was so heated up with anger, I just kept stabbing and stabbing and stabbing her, and I took off her head.
This unsettling 000 call from July 20th, 2019 was made by 25-year-old Jessica Camilleri, who lived on St. Clair Avenue in Western Sydney, Australia. The detectives found the call eerie as Jessica described an extremely gruesome scene, but she herself seemed quite calm, and they were not wrong about the nature of this crime. On the call, Jessica had been trying to hide the chaos that had unfolded mere moments ago at her house. Jessica lived with her 57-year-old mother, Rita Camilleri. Jessica was a troubled child who suffered from multiple mental illnesses, which put a strain on Rita's life as well. Despite facing many difficulties because of Jessica, Rita loved her and did her best to provide her with a good life, but she could never have expected or imagined what Jessica did to her on that horrific night of July 20th, 2019. When detectives responded to the call, they found Jessica standing outside her home, completely drenched in blood. At the crime scene, which almost resembled the setting of a horror movie, they found Rita's decapitated body. What happened between Jessica and Rita that night? Did Jessica act in self-defense, or was there something more to the story? We begin all the way back on October 12, 1993, when Jessica Camilleri was born as the second daughter to the Maltese-Australian couple, Vince and Rita Camilleri. While Christy, Jessica's older sister, had a normal childhood, it wasn't the same for Jessica. Although Jessica was articulate and able to communicate, her parents learned that she was born with an intellectual disability. Jessica had an IQ of 55 to 60, which was significantly lower than the normal IQ range. This put Jessica in the bottom 1% of the population. Growing up, Jessica showed delay in developmental milestones such as walking, talking, and coordination. When she started attending school, teachers noted her delays in reading, writing, math, and language. Eventually, Jessica's parents learned that she's on the autism spectrum, which affected her judgment, awareness of other people's thoughts and feelings, and her ability to empathize. Lagging years behind her age group made not only Jessica's academic life difficult, but also her social life. Going through mental trauma every day, Jessica started showing extreme reactions of rage, which slowly developed into intermittent explosive disorder. Her IED was related to a lack of serotonin, the mood hormone in the brain. It was not just normal anger. It was a mental disorder that usually started at the age of 6 and intensified in adolescence and early adulthood. Jessica didn't lose control on every occasion, only when there was a stressor or any kind of provocation. Growing up, she faced difficulties with complex daily activities such as grocery shopping, catching transport, banking, and home care. Due to her autism, Jessica got fixated on certain things. Jessica was fascinated by horror movies with scenes of extreme gore and slaughter, such as Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Saw, and Jeepers Creepers. As she spent hours and hours watching movies of such kind, Jessica's fascination with bloodshed grew stronger. When Jessica was a teenager, her parents separated. Vince, Jessica's father, didn't want to stay with Jessica and Rita anymore because of the hostile environment of the house. He blamed Rita for Jessica's worsening condition and said that she couldn't discipline her own daughter. Rita was at her lowest point in life at that time, but still managed to keep her life together while also looking after Jessica. After her father had left, the intensity of Jessica's explosive outburst at school increased. She would very frequently get suspended for attacking other students, and sometimes even teachers. Her victims were mostly females, but on one occasion she bit a male student, and even when people tried to pull her off him, she refused to disengage her teeth. Jessica eventually had to leave school and be placed in supportive environments. But that didn't help either. Jessica still had explosive outbursts and was unable to cope in all of these environments, so she ended up on disability support pension. From 2013 onwards, Jessica was sitting at home. Having no friends, she would always sit in her room all day watching scary movies. In the years that followed, there were multiple incidences where Jessica had to be taken to psychiatric units due to her outburst. In early 2018, Rita brought Jessica to Nepean Hospital in Western Sydney. She stayed there for about 9 days due to a serious mood disorder episode. They prescribed lithium for what they suspected was bipolar disorder, along with some antipsychotic medication. On several occasions during her time at psychiatric units, Jessica would unfortunately lose control of her behavior, and she would end up lashing out at doctors and nurses. This attitude led to her being banned from a doctor's office after she had an episode of paranoia and aggression towards another female patient in the waiting room. By late 2018, Jessica was off her medication, which also served to suppress her IED. Although there were no major outbursts sometime into 2019, being off her medication didn't mean she had gained control over her condition. By July 2019, Jessica had a reasonable amount of therapy sessions and had seen multiple psychiatrists, but there was hardly any noticeable progress. With no improvement in her condition, Jessica's state of mind started to get worse, and on the night of Saturday, July 20th, 2019, all hell broke loose. Jessica began that Saturday on a sour note, as her mother had been preoccupied looking after a 4-year-old child, a family member whose name was never released to the public. Jessica was bothered by that kid and wanted her mother's undivided attention at all times. Jessica and her mother had visited Christy earlier that day. On the way to Christy's place, Rita, Jessica's mother, humiliated Jessica in front of a man who was just passing by. The tension was already high because of this incident, and later when the 4-year-old child came along with Rita, it only added more fuel to Jessica's rage. The pressure had been building up. Jessica was like a volcano, waiting to erupt. By evening, when everyone was back home, Jessica had asked her mother to call a doctor, but when the doctor arrived, she couldn't handle Jessica's torments and left very quickly in fear for her life. Jessica even chased her down the driveway, but the doctor was able to flee the scene in her car. Jessica and Rita had their dinner, but Jessica wanted to place another order. When Rita couldn't stop Jessica from making multiple calls to the food outlet, she threatened Jessica to send her back to a mental health unit. Rita started walking towards the phone. She had faced enough of Jessica's tantrums for the day and wanted to call an ambulance to take her back to a psychiatric unit. And that's when the attack began. Within a few seconds, Jessica grew outrageous. She grabbed her mother by the hair and dragged her towards the kitchen. Rita was crying for help, trying to make a grip on the wall so she could get out of Jessica's clutches. But Rita was a petite woman compared to Jessica, and all her attempts failed. On getting to the kitchen, Jessica threw her mother on the ground and started stabbing her with steak knives while the 4-year-old child stood in a corner and witnessed the traumatic incident. Remarkably, the little one summoned incredible courage and tried to intervene. He bravely jumped on Jessica, attempting to stop her, but tragically, he ended up with a knife injury on his cheek. Later, he was discovered in a room covered in vomit, clearly shaken by the harrowing ordeal. Once Jessica started gouging holes through her mother's body, she didn't stop until her mother's head came off. At around 11:30 p.m. that same night, Jessica walked out of the house and over to her neighbor's while holding Rita's head in one hand and 2 cell phones in the other. She threw the head outside the neighbor's house and knocked on the door, asking him to call the police. According to her, she brought the head for proof. Jessica went on to another neighbor who helped her call the police with her mother's phone.
Hello, this is Alison from Police Emergency. We just received a call from this number.
Yes, I need you to get the ambulance and the police out here immediately.
To which address?
Come, I need you. This is a immediate life or death situation.
Which suburb or town is that in?
St. Clair.
St. Clair, and what's the nearest crossroad, please?
What's the nearest one? Listen, can you talk to the neighbour? I'm flustered. Can you just talk to him? Because my hand's bleeding. Yes, thank you. Can you talk to him? Oh, my finger's broken. I can't.
It's all right.
Okay, talk to him.
In the middle of the conversation, Jessica gave the phone to her neighbor. He briefly spoke to the operator over the phone while Jessica could be heard murmuring in the background.
Hello?
Hi. What's happened?
I don't know. We was just at home, but she just come in screaming for help. And when suddenly I opened the door, she said, just help me and call the police or ambulance. And she said to me, she had a fight with her mom, I think.
Okay.
My mum tried to stab me and I killed her, I think.
So did she just say her mum tried to stab her?
I don't know because of the...
Yes,
Yeah.
with a knife. And in self-defense, I think I killed her. Yes. Can you tell him to come immediately?
Yeah. Can you please just come immediately, please?
Okay, so she believes that she may have killed her mother.
Yes.
Yeah, she said like this, yeah.
Yes.
And where is this at where you are at the moment?
Sorry, who, me?
Yeah, so where are you at the moment?
Yeah.
Is she with you at the moment?
Yes.
Yeah, she's in the front yard of my house.
Okay, all right. So how old is her mother?
How old is your mother?
My mum's dead, I think.
But how old is she?
57.
57. So is she not conscious?
Nah.
I stabbed her because she tried to kill me.
Okay, and you didn't check if she was breathing?
Throughout the conversation, Jessica remained quite persistent, claiming that she killed her mother in self-defense.
Would you come with me, please?
No, I can't go. Sorry about that.
Okay. There's a kid, a 4-year-old kid on the phone in the house.
And is her mother severely bleeding?
No, because we didn't go to her house because I'm outside of my house because I can't go there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you know what the lady's name is?
And my fingers are broken. My
Yeah.
fingers are broken.
Her mother was just his name. Her name.
Jessica Camilleri.
Is that your name? Is that the lady's name who called?
Yes, yes. Can I talk to her? Lady, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Your name's Jessica?
My fingers are broken.
Okay.
Mum has had enough of me because I admit I've been a challenge and this ongoing thing's been going for months anyway. She had enough of me. She grabbed me by the hair and dragged me from my room all the way to the kitchen, and she got a knife and she tried to stab me with it, and I grabbed the knife off her because I thought she was going to stab me, so I stabbed her back. And I was so heated up with anger, I just kept stabbing and stabbing and stabbing her, and I took off her head. Her head is, I ran to my neighbour, not this neighbour, my other neighbour before this one, who's on the other side. He was at work. I told him to call the ambulance and the police immediately. He's going to do so, but no one's at home because everyone in the family is at work now. So he wasn't much help. He said, all I can do is I'll call the police and the ambulance to my address, and I thought it was going to take a bit of time, so I ran to my other neighbour on the other side. Okay. And I had my mum's head in my hand. I know this sounds insane, but I was taking it for evidence to show the neighbour. In the struggle, in the frustration, I didn't know what I was doing. I cut her head off. I chopped her head off with a knife.
Okay. What type of knife was it?
There was all sorts of knives. There was about 7 knives I was stabbing her with. A few of the knives broke. When that knife broke, I got another one and did the same.
Where's the knives now?
They're all in the kitchen. There's blood everywhere. There's blood everywhere. Yeah.
And you're outside the house?
Yes. The ambulance and the police have rocked up. Do you want to stay on the phone?
No, that's okay. What's your phone number, Jessica?
Look, you're better off. This is my mum's phone number, but my mum's not here anymore, okay? She's gone.
Okay, what's your date of birth?
October 12, 1993. Over here.
All right, I'll let you go speak to the police.
Yeah, hang up, okay?
Okay, bye.
Because I can't, I'm full of blood.
Senior Constable Anthony D'Agostino was the first one to arrive at the crime scene. He saw Jessica standing outside her house in a blue dress with flowers on it. She was covered in blood from head to toe and was carrying a mobile phone and a bottle of water, both which had blood all over them. The detective pressed the record button on his body cam to capture his conversation with Jessica. She told the detective where her mother's head was by pointing towards it. She then started asking if the doctors could sew Rita's head back on and if she still could be brought back to life. Jessica showed no remorse. She was only concerned about herself and asked the detective if she would get the death penalty. The detective tried to calm Jessica down and ask her to tell him what happened. Jessica kept repeating the statement that she only killed her mother in self-defense. She said that her mother barged into her bedroom and dragged her out by the hair. To defend herself, Jessica got a hold of a knife and stabbed her mother. To make her self-defense story more believable, she told the detectives about her mental illnesses and tried to play the victim. A while later, more officers arrived to investigate the scene and found Rita's head lying on the footpath outside the neighbor's home. And just a few moments after that, they found the rest of her dismembered body inside the kitchen of their St. Clair Avenue home. Looking at the bloodied kitchen, they described the crime to be of extraordinary viciousness and violence. Jessica was arrested in the front yard of her neighbor's home. Police said that they were aware of the Camilleri family, but what unfolded on that night was unforeseeable and beyond their imagination. After an autopsy, detectives learned that Rita's body had been mutilated even after she had died. There were more than 100 stab wounds on her body, and she was still alive till at least the first 90 blows, most of which were on the neck and head. But that wasn't even the most gore part about this heinous crime. A part of Rita's nose and tongue had been chopped off. Both of her eyeballs had been pulled out, only to be prodded and squeezed. The detectives found 7 knives at the crime scene, all of which had been used by Jessica to stab her mother. Jessica's attacks were so violent that 4 out of the 7 knives had snapped during the killing. The morning after the tragedy on July 21, 2019, Jessica gave an insight into what really led her to mercilessly kill her mother. She started by saying that she had hurt a lot of people, but never laid a finger on her mother until last night. When Jessica's mother threatened to send her to psychiatric care, Jessica lost her temper and wanted to teach her mother a lesson. Jessica told the detectives that she never wanted to kill her, but it got out of hand very quickly. Jessica's IED took over and she couldn't stop stabbing her mother. Jessica was charged with murder, and her trial took place in December 2020 before Justice Helen Wilson. The jury was made aware that the trial was not about contesting whether Jessica killed her mother or not, but about defending that Jessica's mental illnesses took control and caused a substantial impairment upon her mind at the time she committed the crime. In his opening statement, Crown Prosecutor Tony McCarthy said that Jessica had a lengthy history of assaulting people. Jessica had troubled and threatened even her own family members, telling them that she would cut off their heads with a knife. Tony pointed out that Jessica was a fan of horror movies, especially the ones which included killing people violently and dismembering their bodies. He added that Jessica only had a mild to moderate case of intellectual disability. Jessica's defense attorney, Nathan Steele, asked the jury to put emotion and sympathy to one side and decide the case based on the evidence. He stated that due to the effects of her mental conditions, Jessica had impaired capacity at the time she fatally attacked her mother. Since her arrest, she had been seeing Professor David Greenberg. During the trial, he was called to give his diagnosis on Jessica. He said that he didn't find any signs which showed that Jessica suffered from schizophrenia or auditory or visual hallucinations. Professor David pointed out that Jessica didn't usually make use of social gestures in communicating, but when she described the horrific details of the night she killed her mother, she had a lack of emotion on her face and was quite precise about the nitty-gritties of the crime. He also said that Jessica had low self-esteem and exhibited personality problems with narcissistic features. With all the extra care she grew up with, Jessica had grown up to be an egocentric and self-centered person. She had a history of demanding attention, and when that attention was not given to her, her IED would come into effect. Jessica's relatively calm state of mind by the time police arrived was not unusual. Her temper quickly dissipated after she had acted upon an offense. She had a sense of entitlement, an unreasonable expectation of receiving favorable treatment from the ones around her. When things would not work out according to her, she would get furious.
As Jessica Camilleri got older, she became increasingly difficult. Her sister saying she spent most of her days on the couch, not even getting up when she was thirsty, and demanding her mother go get her a drink.
In her mind, she believed that her disability made her unique and failed to recognize that others also had feelings and needs. She was very sensitive to criticism and would often react with disdain or rage towards it. Aside from stating his diagnosis, Professor David said that Jessica's only friend was her mother, who was now dead. The court also heard evidence from Jessica's sister, Christy. She testified that her little sister had been diagnosed with multiple disorders including dyslexia and attention deficit disorder, and had been severely bullied by other students at the school. She stated that when their father left them, Jessica's condition started to get out of hand. Because of their father, Jessica remained in control and was somewhat disciplined. But all of that changed soon after he left the family. During the sentencing, Justice Wilson acknowledged the tension between balancing the need for punishment and sentencing a significantly disabled offender. The judge found that despite Jessica's loss of control, she understood what she was doing and how severely wrong it was. She stated that in light of the extreme gravity of this crime, the tremendous harm done to Rita's family, and the need to protect the community from Jessica, a harsh sentence was necessary.
Historically, that was the effect of the provision on which Section 23A was modelled, that is, Section 2 of the UK Homicide Act. That section affected the operation of the existing law in two respects. First, by providing a defence to the crime of capital murder, it protected a qualified offender from the death penalty, and secondly, it provided a modified sentence to many mentally abnormal offenders, especially the uncontrollable impulse offenders, who were not entitled to the more restricted defence of insanity according to the McNaughton rules. But that provision has never been regarded as requiring in all instances the imposition of a penalty less than life imprisonment. This is an instance where the offender's disabilities cannot require a sentence substantially less than the maximum sentence available. In light of the extreme gravity of this crime, the very great harm done, and the need to protect the community from the offender, a stern sentence is called for. Before that sentence is imposed, I wish to extend my sympathy and the sympathy of the court to the offender's sister and her family. I recognise that no sentence imposed upon the offender can make good their loss or diminish the grief they feel.
Christy was relieved to hear the judge say that. Knowing that her mother would get justice gave her some closure.
I'd just like to say that I really hope that our justice system prevails. I would not wish this upon any family. It has been extremely traumatic for myself, my son, my family, and I'm just having faith in the justice system.
Christy was very sure of what her relationship would be with Jessica from now onwards.
That you felt like she made choices that brought her to this point?
Yeah, absolutely, she did. She had the support from many avenues, and unfortunately I feel that our mental health system let her down, let my mother down.
What Jessica had done to Rita was unimaginable.
She has no support from our family, so I don't really care what happens to her from this point on or when she is released, and I just hope that it is a lengthy sentence so that way members of the community remain safe.
By the end of the week-long trial in December 2020, Justice Helen Wilson found Jessica not guilty of murder, but guilty of manslaughter for the killing of her 57-year-old mother, Rita Camilleri.
Miss Camilleri, would you stand up, please? You may stand as well if you think that assists, Miss Support Officer. For the manslaughter of Rita Camilleri on the 20th of July 2019, the offender is sentenced to a term of imprisonment for 21 years and 7 months, commencing on the 20th of July 2019 and expiring on the 19th of February 2041. The non-parole period is one of 16 years and 2 months imprisonment, which will expire on the 19th of September 2035. You can sit down, Miss Camilleri.
Even though the maximum sentence for manslaughter was 25 years, on March 12, 2021, Justice Helen Wilson decided to give Jessica a comparatively lesser sentence of 21 years and 7 months, and she would only be eligible for parole after 16 years and 2 months. Justice Helen Wilson said that Jessica had practiced grave and mutilating depravity when killing her 57-year-old mother Rita in July 2019. She also highlighted the fact that Rita Camilleri's body had more than 90 defensive wounds to her hands. While experiencing the extreme pain, Rita must have been shocked and terrified by what was being done to her by her own beloved daughter. Justice Helen Wilson also stated that the worst part about this crime was that it took place in the presence of a 4-year-old child. Now Jessica Camilleri would spend the next couple of decades behind bars in Western Sydney's Silverwater Prison, Australia's harshest women's jail, as a convicted killer. In prison, Jessica's mental health condition didn't get any better. Going through all the teasing and torments brought back her haunting memories of her school life. She would often get into fights with other prisoners, and sometimes even guards. But things got serious when she was charged with assaulting 2 prison officers, inflicting actual bodily harm as a result of an incident in August 2021 and October 2021. The officers claimed that Jessica grabbed them by the hair and let go of the grip only when she had pulled out a chunk of hair from the officers' scalps. The officers had to be hospitalized due to the injuries. As a result, Jessica was placed in an isolation ward of the prison. A verdict for these felonies was determined to be delivered later. In September 2022, 28-year-old Jessica challenged her sentence in the Court of Criminal Appeal. She and her defense team argued her loss of control in the attack on her mother was not properly considered. Tim Game, from Jessica's legal team, told the court that Jessica's sentence did not reflect that her disabilities were on the border of being classified as mental illnesses. He further argued that the sentence was too harsh for someone who suffered a total loss of control. Tim Game added that Justice Helen Wilson made a mistake while sentencing Jessica as she focused on how Jessica understood her actions, instead of the fact that two psychologists found that Jessica was not in control of herself for the duration of the attack. He stressed his opinion that Judge Helen Wilson had made a huge mistake by handing Jessica such a lengthy sentence, since Jessica had offered to plead guilty to manslaughter even before the trial. According to Jessica and her legal team, Judge Helen Wilson had done everything she could to wrap up the trial and take the easy way out by handing out an unjust verdict. Tim Game said that there had been a considerable improvement in Jessica's conduct since her original sentencing took place back in 2021. And that's why he was hopeful that through this appeal she would get a much shorter sentence. The Crown argued against the appeal, and Justice Wilson was right to impose a heavy sentence for the grave crime Jessica had committed. They further added that Jessica's mental disability was the only factor that kept Justice Wilson from handing her the maximum sentence. In Sydney Supreme Court, Justice Peter Hamill dismissed Jessica and her team's claims that the sentence handed down to her last year was excessive, and that Justice Wilson had been incorrect in her assessment of the gravity of the crime. However, Justice Hamill ruled that Jessica should be resentenced, with the support from Justices Christine Admonson and Richard Kavanaugh, based on the evidence of multiple psychiatrists and a psychologist. Justice Hamill found that Jessica only had a simple understanding of moral wrongfulness due to her intellectual disability and autism spectrum disorder when she murdered her 57-year-old mother back in 2019. He ordered that she be resentenced to a prison term of 16 years with a non-parole period of 12 years. While there had been a reduction in Jessica's sentence, the verdict on Jessica's assault on two prison officers, which she committed in 2021, rolled in. On September 4, 2023, a statement was released which said that Jessica Camilleri's sentence had been extended by 22 months for assaulting two prison officers and ripping their hair out. Jessica's family, friends, and psychiatrists said that even though Rita's life was a difficult one, nobody ever expected that she would be taken away so tragically, and that too by her own daughter. A daughter whom Rita had looked after and taken care of for 25 years. Rita's death deeply affected her eldest daughter, Christy. As Christy remembered her mother for her selfless and loving nature, she also shared her thoughts about Jessica.
My mother was a beautiful person inside and out, a heart of gold. I will never forgive or forget what has happened. I have to live with a little boy that has to live with that trauma for the rest of his life, and I am absolutely no way forgiving her. I can't look at her. She took our mother like she was nothing. Thank you.
On the night she died, 57-year-old Rita had finally decided to start living a life for herself, rather than giving everything to Jessica and her needs. Sadly, this was no deal for Jessica. But now the only person who truly cared for Jessica was dead, with nobody to look after her anymore. The only person who truly cared for Jessica was dead. Jessica's looming future entailed confinement, a monotonous prison routine, and spending a majority of her time every single day in a 3x4-meter cell. Do you think Jessica's sentence was justified? When Jessica will be released from prison one day, what do you think her life would be like, since her mother won't be around anymore? Let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. If there's a case you'd like us to cover, don't hesitate to drop your recommendation in the comments section below. For more captivating true crime stories, like, share, and subscribe to our channel.